Hopefully you can hear me now, right? Yeah, cool. Okay, so Oxford versus Cambridge. I think this is a bit of a meaningless distinction. They're both quite similar. They're both 800 years old. They have the tradition. They have the same kind of culture and financing and structure that went into them, but like you saw in the bullet points. But the question was versus, so I guess you want to know what's different. Okay, so Oxford is more of a city than Cambridge is. It's much more urban, and the city and the university are far more mixed together. So, to move around your day, to go from building to building, you'll be going from one side of the city to the other. Quite often, it's the city and the university really are pretty much the same thing. It's got a lot more shops. It's got a giant mall. It's got a cool market where you can buy weird things. We've got a great chocolate shop, for example. It just feels a bit more urban than Cambridge does. But on the other hand, Cambridge is very pretty. The river runs right through the middle of Cambridge, and you can the picture you can see there is Cambridge, and it's just a slightly more attractive place to be. And it depends on your aesthetic taste, I suppose, as to whether you prefer the town or the country. But there's potentially a difference there. The academically, again, they're really similar. You have to really think to find a difference between them. So I'd say that Oxford, and this is a generalization, but I'd say Oxford is very slightly more structured, in a good way, though. They sort of give you less freedom, but what you do is really important. Whereas at Cambridge, certainly studying my subject, there was a tremendous amount of freedom. I could do whatever I want. Like I had a friend who wrote his final year dissertation on Star Wars, and this is a university that specializes in Shakespeare and Chaucer. So they give you that kind of freedom, which I don't think you quite get the same degree of at Oxford. There's a difference with the libraries as well. So they both have a very complicated library system. They have more than 100 libraries each, and you often have to go to different ones to find what you want, but they all have a central library. So Cambridge has what it calls the University Library, and Oxford has the Old Bodleian Library. And the difference here is that you can't borrow books from the Old Bodleian in Oxford, which may or may not be a problem for you. So if you like sitting on the grass outside and working, and you have to get a rare book that only this library has, you may not be able to do that at Oxford if you can't find it at another library. And so that could potentially be annoying, whereas you can borrow most things from Cambridge. On the other hand, you do get used to having a workflow where you sit and you have your little desk in what is a very beautiful building, and you have your little stack of books and you go through them bit by bit. So it just gives you a slightly different workflow. I think you have to think about it differently. Neither of these things are better or worse than each other, but if you're looking to find differences, I think that's about as good as you'll get in terms of meaningful differences.
So having sort of lived in both cities and studied at both universities, which were you to choose if I had to make you choose?
Everyone always asks me this. I think Cambridge has got my heart because it's the first one I went to. But I don't think I would be able to do the subject that I do at Cambridge now. So Oxford for me makes more sense. And you might find that you have to really read your course details because English at Cambridge is not the same as English at Oxford, and same for every other course. So they will approach them differently. So you need to think about how you want to approach the subject, not just whether you like the subject, but whether you like their approach to it. And you might find that you like neither of their approaches, so that might be a problem. But if you should try to pick one over the other, and think about who's closer to my way of thinking, Oxford or Cambridge, because they will very often be quite different, and they deliberately try to be different as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then turning over to Mehek. So Mehek, you did your undergrad at Oxford, you did your master's at Oxford, and then you did your doctorate at Oxford, and you're still at Oxford working at a very cool startup. Isn't it time that you give Cambridge a go?
That's a really good question. I did think about giving Cambridge a go when I was applying for my DPhils, and then just as luck has it, I got into a very cool project in Oxford. So I think it really depends on what you, again, going back to what Yannick just mentioned, really depends on the type of subject that you want to study and the type of overall experience that you want to have. So when I applied as an undergraduate, it was a bit of a naive decision, and I just chose Oxford because I knew more about Oxford and I knew more people who'd been to Oxford. Eventually, however, that decision was proven to be right, because the way that Oxford and Cambridge do natural sciences or biological sciences is quite different. So in Cambridge, you have this one course called natural sciences where you're going to be studying about lots of different things. So you get a breadth of content there. Whereas in Oxford, you have 3 different courses around biology. So you have biochemistry, which, if you're more interested in sort of the molecular and cellular underlying kind of mechanisms underlying disease, that's the course that you should go for. Whereas if you're more interested in sort of human and animal and plant biology, then there's the biological sciences course, and then there's biomedical as well, which is when you're more interested sort of in a more kind of physician sort of medical sciences course, that's the course that you end up choosing for. So I kind of did know what I wanted to do, which is why I think eventually it was the right decision. At a graduate level, it's very different. At a graduate level, it's more about the lab that you end up choosing, the project that you're interested in, and then I don't think at that point it matters. As long as it's a good, credible university, what I would say is Oxford and Cambridge both sort of open a lot of doors. It is kind of the breadth of opportunities that it offers to you, not just in your subject, but also outside. So, for example, I think if I was maybe in another different city, a different university, I would not have had sort of this entry or introduction to entrepreneurship that you end up having in a smaller sort of city where you can just tend to try out a lot of different things. So I would highly sort of encourage you to look a bit deeper into what interests you in terms of sort of future career options, and then choose a university or a city that really matches those interests.
Right.